Thank you.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you guys. So I did my presentation earlier today, and I talked about how you are not cold, you're conditioned, and how you have been conditioned to suppress your emotions, and that you have been conditioned to hide and handle things on your own. But that is not working for you anymore, likely, and that relationship dynamics have changed so that you kind of have to start to open up and be vulnerable. And I understand that part of the hesitation in doing that is right, seeming soft, right? We're told that emotions are weaknesses. But what I want to help people understand is that emotions are not weaknesses, they're information, right? They're data. They are there to tell you something. Every emotion serves a function. And so without going through the whole thing again, um, I just had questions. I mean, not unless you guys want me to. I don't think that's what I was
No,
supposed to do, right?
we're going straight to the panel discussion.
Through the panel discussion. So this conversation kind of picks up where the presentation left off. So moving the theory from theory to real life experiences, and so questions around how emotional intelligence shapes you, your relationship and leadership, what emotional intelligence looks like in practice, and then how men can connect more deeply. So I'm just here to ask the questions. And so my first question to the men: what did being a man mean in your household growing up? You're muted.
Yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Being a
Mhm,
provider, being the head of the household, being in
mhm,
control, making all of the decisions.
mhm,
Growing up, that's
mhm,
basically how it was. And I actually brought that to my household. And I was thinking, I've always thought this shouldn't be just my role because I'm in a partnership with someone else. So it took me a while to figure it out, but I finally did.
mhm,
I have to echo that too. My father was, I mean, but then again, in my house, it was my dad. He was the law of the land, and and my mother, she reinforced his enforcement. But if I had to say who was I most afraid of, it was my father. You don't
mhm,
have to you don't have to. I mean, but no, he was always fair and honest, and and all the quabbles between my brothers and my sisters growing up. My father, if he had to settle it, oh, wait on that, man. Don't, I mean, and my mother would always step in to try to, and I would rather have her settle it once and for all. But if my mother couldn't settle it, oh my goodness, where that was gonna be hell to pay for that. But and I think that's a fair. Now there are more and more single parent single family mothers, and they have to rule the day, too. But I mean, and not to say nothing's wrong, something's wrong with that, but men and women play different roles, and there's a requirement for that in some ways in households like that, and we have to find the in a new cultured way of enhancing, communicating, and involved with deliberations that way. So that's my response.
mhm. And so a follow up to that, how have you redefined what it means to be a man for yourself? Because I think that this is something that is subjective, how you define manhood versus me versus, right? Everybody has their own experiences and definition. And so how does your definition of being a man today differ, if at all, from what you were taught growing up?
Well, I mean, when I was in high school, it was
Mhm,
all about athletics and testosterone, and everybody wanted to be tougher than the other guy. And as I grew, I understood
mhm,
that being more sensitive. And my interest changed
mhm.
from wanting to be an NFL quarterback at 5'8" to to wanting to be a writer and wanting to understand emotions and issues. But I still get, as I alluded to in the in my question to Clifton, is it bothers me, the toughness. It bothers me when I watch Hulk Hogan at a political convention pulling his shirt off. I think America has gone beyond that. And so I think being honest and true and sensitive, I think are important values, but that's just me.
Anybody else, have you redefined what it means to be a man for you?
To be
Personally,
honest,
the old ways are the true ways. I think we have to change, and I think that the continental divide between men and women, I'll say it that way, it's not a divide at all. It's coming to understand and listen to people more with a sense of purpose and a sense of alternations. I mean, because we live in a culture that, now it's unique perspectives. How do we position it so that everybody gets their due worth? And so just to answer it that way.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point that you bring up in terms of the difference between men and women, but I think it comes down to socialization as well. I think that part of the issue is how we are so socialized, right? It's not the fact that men lack emotion or that they're less emotional, it's that they're conditioned to hide them. And I think it's not even just, right? Men are taught to suppress. I think that there is um, a a subset of women that also buy into that, right? So they don't hold that space for men, right? You're not supposed to cry, like you're not supposed to feel like this, like man up, right? So I think because even though those messages weren't directed to us, um, because we have also heard it, I think that there is it was adopted as well. But I think it is very difficult, and specifically in romantic relationships, because that's what I work with. Right? I think I have to tell my clients all the time, right? It is difficult to expect your partner to hold space for your feelings if you don't at least acknowledge theirs. So I think that there's some unlearning that has to happen on both parts to redefine, right, what it means to be a man. Like you're human, right? Emotions is a part of being a human being, so I think that there is definitely relearning on both parts that has to happen. Um, how did you or how do you balance the being strong versus being emotionally available? Clifton, I know you mentioned like once you come out of the military, how do you learn how to do both, or how do you, give yourself that space and grace to feel, but also recognizing that there are certain environments or certain spaces that may not be safe for me to be that. So how do you hold that balance?
um, I stopped worrying about what other people felt.
Okay.
How I didn't bother trying to attune myself to their expectations. I got to the point where I'm like, this is who I am. This is who I feel comfortable being with. If you can't feel comfortable with me being the way I am, then I guess we don't need to hang. So
Mhm.
I got to that. It took me a while to get to that point, but once I decided that I need to be, well, because I was actually the opposite when I was younger. I was a whole lot more emotional. It's like that story about, the doctor telling me if I don't change. And
Mhm.
I didn't change so much that I became less of the person who I was. Where my changes came from was the military. Because I actually did play football in high school, but I wasn't into all of that testosterone. I just enjoyed playing the ball. That's it. I wanted to just have fun. But it was the military that made me change. It was hanging out with all of those guys. That was all about testosterone. It was me being overseas, doing the things that we did, and coming back with all of those memories that made me close off from everything and everyone. And that was one of those self-awareness things where once I realized the basis of my issues, the basis of my rage, that I was able to find a path back to being more like what I was when I was younger. So that was my journey, to becoming more like I was when I was younger,
As a
and then
subject,
not caring what everybody else thought.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's an important subject matter, not being so involved with that. But then now, and there's some other issues that we need to make sure we're aware of, because I mean, emotional access or emotional liberty, being able, I mean, boys don't cry, man up, that kind of thing. I mean, but or being emotionally available. No, I mean, if you can't find the liberty to expose yourself or, to free yourself, those things could lead to substance abuse. And I would guarantee that that kind of thing could also has led to divorce, many divorces, because the freedom to let yourself go, to understand and to listen and to open up regarding things like that. I mean, big deals. These are big deals. That's my response.
We're talking about emotions, but what role does sensitivity play?
Huh.
Because I think a lot of men, well, to say, I guess I'm hung up on high testosterone. I don't think the problem is I mean, they're emotional in the wrong way, but sensitive, I think sensitivity is where it all begins. I'd be interested to hear your opinions on that.
I think sensitivity is a hyper reaction, right? We know that everybody has emotions, everybody can be sad and hurt or whatever it is. I think sensitivity comes into play when you are um, more easily triggered by things that may not trigger the quote unquote average person. Mhm.
I mean sensitivity to other people.
Sensitivity to
I
other
mean, not
people.
me being overly sensitive,
Mhm.
triggering, but what role does my sensitivity to other people play in the whole game of emotional intelligence?
So I think that's where, if I'm understanding correctly, I think that's where empathy comes in,
Yep.
right? And so I think, and what I do when I teach other people to do, especially when it comes to their partner, is step outside of your own shoes, step into your partner's shoes to understand. I'll tell people you don't have to agree,
Mm.
but just to take the time to see things from other perspectives. I tell people not to project their own experiences, because what we have a tendency to do is we will hear a piece of information, but we fill in the gaps with our own experiences. And that's when we start to project, or that's when we start to formulate opinions about other people's behavior. Why didn't you do this? Or why should, but all of those questions are based on what you feel like you would have done in that situation, but they are not you, right? It's also based on your past experiences. You are making that judgment or questioning that person's behavior, their actions, or thoughts based on information that you filled in from your past experience and not that other person, right? If somebody is celebrating their first apartment, just because you have a house doesn't mean that their celebration is any less important, right? You have to step outside of your house and understand where they came from. Maybe they are just been homeless for the last 5 years, right? And so you can't sit from your house and say, "Oh, why are they celebrating an apartment when you're in a 5 bedroom home?" Right? And so empathy is about really taking the time to understand the other person, understand where they are coming from, and that's it, right? Don't put your own spin on it. It's not about you to judge anybody else, and just truly understand what it is that they need and how you can support them, or just simply understand and leave it at that.
Mm. Interesting. Thank you.
Mhm,
Okay, we're gonna move to an open panel discussion, and
mhm.
so that everybody has a chance to involve themselves from perspective, because the whole idea by our interactions today gives us the opportunity to find the power to negotiate, to evaluate, and to understand and to listen and to navigate, because you'll find yourself in traffic and you have to see a matter cultivate before it does. So negotiate. Negotiating, I mean, even if you're in a grocery store line and somebody breaks your line, cuts in front of you. I mean, it's going to take some navigation and negotiations, and sometimes, I mean, and some people are cut so close that they're not giving anything up. You jumped in front of me. I can't handle that. So, tactical solutions to how we navigate, how we negotiate, and because I mean, quite frankly, it's completely better for you to just say, "Oh, go ahead, please." just be courteous, man, because we ain't trying to be on the 11 o'clock news. You know, I mean, if you gauge everything based on the lesson, let me stay off the news, man. Get me off the news.
All right. So, Erin, we give you 5 more minutes to wrap up because we have to get everyone to introduce themselves. So, over to you to wrap us up, and we'll bring Erin back. Wasn't she fantastic? Everybody, please
Absolutely.
give her an applause.
Okay, good, right,
Yes.
right, very good. Very good.
Definitely.
Okay.
All right.
So I would say that I just want you to remember that emotional intelligence is not about being soft, but it is a skill set that strengthens both men and women, both at home and at work. Um, I think that emotional unavailability is often it's not about a lack of care, but more so about a lack of tools. Right, you don't have the tools to express yourself. Right, earlier in my presentation, I talked about right if I go to the doctors because I'm not feeling well, and the doctor asks me what's going on, and I cannot articulate what's going on with me, that doesn't make me any less sick because I don't have the words to express what's going on with me. And so I think men, particularly, are socially conditioned to suppress emotions in the name of being strong, right? But this suppression often leads to breakdowns in connection and communication. And so I think that you have to just remember that emotions are data, not distraction. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your emotions and respond instead of reacting. So earlier I mentioned naming what you feel, understanding the message behind it, and then making sure that you are responding with purpose.
All right. We've got a very